我这些年来，大家看了有报道没了的呢？在哪个样子呢？那个突击进步，这可能这是属于这里头的，我做两年长期能做哈送来了的呢，家政做啊的审计吧你啊，做的这个家政做啊的讲的呢，审计吧的讲的送的那个呢，家政做的送的，家的呢东西加工东西。这就不他们说个哈过的，上这个家的，上这个哈过有的，这个嘛多，这个上这的，上的上这个大你的上呢，这现在能看到的，大你有嘛的，这现在别切不差了的，这个上这的，哦，这现在没有哈过上的，这现在有嘛东西有的。这东西他们说东西没办法的嘛，生活能看到哈过了这里，实际中的这个，就知道了就大个你说的叫好玩嘛，叫来说的呢，那一个火头上嘛来说，这个我这个没的呢，这啥他妈讲进去，这些就好了，都工作跑了这里咋的，到底送逻辑的，这啥这个是，这中他们这么送了的，中他们这么哈工啊，身体嘛哈工过的，身体呢大的你我了，饮品个落结工作，饮品个落的的，从的是你就了有的，人那的切包的特别帮过的，特别把就是你变了，做切包呢。有些长龙同学写出过的，做的呢，那个女的送到这样他们那个嘛人。现在有的做的才有的，上街的才有的，第三街这个上的平个嘛的，上的切不过的，说这前面有的升级把的，这哪个上街的老他们满意把的。
So Shidele to everyone joining us on the live stream. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about the practice of the great compassionate one, according to the tantric tradition. And so generally speaking, all practices should unite the sutras and the tantras. And in all practices, taking refuge and cultivating bodhicitta are most important. So the refuge actually is related to cultivating bodhicitta, because where really does our motivation or this mind generation of bodhicitta come from? It comes from having taken refuge. So when we take refuge, we seek to be protected from suffering. And who is the one who knows the method of refuge, the method to be protected? That is the Buddha, a perfectly complete Buddha. The Buddha is someone who has cleared away all dualistic grasping itself and other, and who has realized that the mind is like space. And within the space-like nature of the mind, there is no duality of self and other. So the Buddha had realized the vastness of the mind. He realized that there is no duality, and that as long as there is dualistic thinking, there will be suffering. So the state of Buddhahood is a state of great bliss that is devoid of all suffering. It is a mind that abides like space. And so the Buddha himself, when he had attained complete enlightenment, he secluded himself from ordinary life, and he did not teach the Dharma initially because he felt that it is so profound that others simply would not be able to comprehend the meaning of it. So he decided not to teach them the Dharma initially. And then Brahma and Indra came to make offerings to the Buddha of a golden vessel and the right turning conch with the request to teach the Dharma. And so then he first taught the Dharma to these gods, and he taught them the ultimate truth. And they realized its meaning. And so that is, and the meaning of that is that ultimately it comes down to the mind generation of bodhicitta. That is what they really have understood. That the antidote to self-grasping is the altruistic mind. So the Buddha taught that this is what you have to develop. And it is something that all beings possess to some extent. We all possess love in our minds. But the Buddha taught that this love must become great, immeasurable love. This love is like the heat, the warmth that melts the ice blocks. And if that heat is very strong, then many ice blocks can be melted. But if the heat is very weak, then it can't even provide warmth for our own physical body. So we all possess some heat, we all possess some love, but the Buddha said that this limited love is not so beneficial. You need to cultivate great love. So that is a special quality of the Buddhist teachings. It is the mind generation of the four immeasurables.
세비바 예스 세비마 예니 담고 삼바 세비바데 주라 마제나 다카로 로과 담마도 저비니 종민양이 랑가 동네를 저 탑대 하고 오는 자라니 동네에 가리 저거도 되는지 나디니 저거도 되는 제나 때문에 동당을 때나 심지리 저거 진짜 마땅 또 저거 냠데 요리 심지리 또 저거 동네에 가리게 저거 요리지 가리게 차도 머리들 되지 또 저거 동네 가리게 요리서 오 심지리 다 생수지도 다 생수 단지 니지 차테는 유모 뭐 제세제동 들이 차지게 조금 제세제동 선거 공도 가리게 되지 오 동네 맛이 동네 시요 동네 맛이네 차지 동네 시바사데 동네 자와 그래 다 단지 뭐 하고 오다 심지 말 인동 대한다 또 상정도 송이 심지 삼바티 총총을 때리 심지 동네 하고 들어다 삼발하고 그래 맨 미지는 다 잠벌는 게 밑에 이거 차고 상는 들이다 땅 만도랑 도면 토탕시에 계좌에 지도를 매도 줘야 잠벌는 게 동네에 하고시 그러다 오 잠벌는 매일에서 동네에 요지 때마트를 보고 동네 하고 말이지 얘는 때 하고나 하고한테 잠벌는 게 약고 차고 족밤에 가는 것도 설로서 깨물이 다 재미 맞 담아 재미 담보들이 하고는 제일 대전 로아를 독들이다 감성들 로감적한 속매를 감기를 좀 매나양 다지도 말하는 박차가도 등이 빠지 정도 하고 대생사만 속으로 하고 다 재미 열세기도 이제 때마다 녹을 다져서 로아를 참아 다 샘적을 해지 동네 민성성의 동네 야 소리 매는 저래 동네 그래서 좀 한번 벌써 그때 담게 싸웠다 또 나지지 벌 터도 나지 나르지 차도 그랬더니 오 따다는 산기 참아 자르고 탑을 나지 미성 세기 상지 사제 때 하고 그 재미 여러 재미 따사마 재미지 참아야고 차고도 없어는 그랬더니 다 인게지 니지 뭐 때도 또 탑가고 딱 개와 두고 레주리 하고 레주리 하고 그래서 다 인게지 다 레주리 하고는 그래들이 인게지는 때문에 다 인게지 다지 단지 제로 다지면 다 심투가 차로도 저런 담지 양도를 탐나도 없어는 심기 방어 뒤들이 답을 주고 어디를 들이로도 남아 있는 남자를 맡으면 내고 소리 오 좋아 쪽으로 들어가나 다사 쪽으로 들어가도 없어 대들은 맞추고 세도 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 말해지 얘는 내고 속나 대들이다 랑프로는 나 차롱도 쉬나 들이 잡도록 잡고도 잡도록 잡아들이 습기도 동문이 다다다 습기는데 다 지방 내말이 요구하는 마음에 당리서 요 말에 내가 하고로도 대외의 재미를 습기도시 이들은 담보 삼바 재미되지 대세를 띠는 게 재미지 들이 다도 숨지 답지 동네 좋아요 봐 대신 가 재미지 들이 당놈 재미지 오 당포대 예비 당포대 예비 들이 생각 간다고 참 재미밖에 로지는 들이 다도 상제 공방 재미적인 감이 하고 대하고는 그 재미적 재미도 들이랑 재미다 나뉘니 봐참 서버 차음 깜들이 다들이 오 깜들이 다다다다 그딸 상제 거서 그 용디 랑세고 하고 그래 오 뭐 맞았다들이 로조도 뭐 거다는 상한답게 매제 보여 말이 장속생이랑 저거들이 대답이 하고들이 주거를 롱거를 저거지 당도 들사제 담도 로조도 그 상한도 없어 오다 될 제가 제군도 없어 들사도 그 상한사도 되는 거 저거래
And so we continue today about the four immeasurables, and so which is on page 12. It begins with, in order to liberate all beings, to empty samsara from its depths into Avalokiteshvara's mandala and generate bodhicitta from within the four immeasurables. So first, we cultivate the four immeasurables. The first immeasurable is the immeasurable love. If immeasurable love does not arise, then this recitation of a verse like this becomes just lip service. We actually need to put that into practice. So ultimately, even though we recite these words, we have not really understood the actual method that frees us from suffering. So what does it mean to become liberated from suffering, and how do we become liberated from suffering? In order to become liberated from suffering, we have to become liberated from self-grasping. From the ultimate perspective, there's only one mind. All sentient beings in the six realms have the same mind. For example, in our world, humans and animals live together. And then yet there's such a great difference. Animals experience so much more suffering, and human beings experience much more happiness. And why is that? Our happiness and our suffering are the creations of our own mind. Because there is self-grasping in the mind, dualistic thinking arises, and that leads to the arising of the 84,000 different afflictive emotions. And this is why the Buddha taught 84,000 different Dharma teachings. It is because we don't know suffering. That is why in the very beginning, the Buddha said, you have to recognize suffering. And what is at the root of all suffering? It is self-grasping. And that is why we need the mind generation of bodhicitta. So that is the meaning of I generate bodhicitta from within the four immeasurables. So first we need to understand suffering, and then on the basis of knowing suffering, such a mind generation of bodhicitta or the four immeasurables can arise. Then we can actually say, I generate bodhicitta. For example, a person who wishes for everyone in this world to be happy. The reason, and then they speak about that, and they make an effort to fight for equal rights and human rights and so forth. Like, why can they do that? Why are they making such effort? It is because they first understand the difficulty, the suffering of people in this world, and on the basis of knowing their suffering, they make a focused effort to benefit those individuals. So for the most part, we are unaware of the suffering of beings in the six realms in samsara. So when you understand the suffering of beings, then you are able to really develop a wish that wants to separate others from suffering. For example, you think, may there be no wars in the world. May everyone be happy in the world. So this is when the first immeasurable of love arises. First, when love arises, you begin to become aware of others' suffering, the suffering of the sentient beings in the 6 realms or the 3 realms, the form realm, formless realm, and the desire realm. Even if one is a sentient being without a body, a formless being, they still are not liberated from self-grasping. And therefore, they still form habitual tendencies that leads to suffering. And the suffering is essentially always the same. So when you recognize that, you give rise to this mind generation where you think, I have to purify my own mind. So that is to empty samsara from its depths, the 6 realms from its depths. So you cultivate this mind generation of bodhicitta, wishing to liberate sentient beings from the suffering of the 3 lower realms and also the higher realms. In the lower realms, beings experience suffering upon suffering. In the higher realms, we mainly experience the suffering of change. There's various kinds of suffering, but all suffering comes down to self-grasping. And because we grasp at a self, we develop dualistic thoughts. So if you understand that point, then the concept of liberating suffering becomes quite simple. All we need to liberate is self-grasping. And then all sentient beings are actually Buddhas once self-grasping is eliminated. And so when you understand that, you know that all they need to cultivate is the 4 immeasurables. When they cultivate love and understand karma, then their self-grasping will diminish. And when their self-grasping diminishes, their pure minds are all the same. Then the ice blocks are all melting to be one with the ocean water. And so with this understanding is really the starting point of the Dharma practice. The path of Dharma practice begins normally with reflecting on the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, and then all the other following stages of the Dharma practice. So in order to become liberated from all suffering of the 6 realms of samsara, it is enough if we only cultivate bodhicitta. So when you recognize that, you think all I need to do is cultivate love. And when sentient beings cultivate love, their minds is all the same. And when I liberate my own self-grasping, when my own ice block melts, then it merges to be one with the ocean-like Buddha mind, and it becomes all pervasive. And then my mind pervades wherever the ocean pervades. And that is the ultimate truth. Ultimately, no real sentient being exists. Ultimately, there is no self. Sentient beings cling to a self that does not actually exist. It is just they don't realize that. So first, in any case, we need to cultivate immeasurable love, and from immeasurable love arises immeasurable compassion. And so immeasurable compassion also leads to immeasurable joy. Knowing that even though sentient beings suffer, ultimately, they all can become liberated from suffering. Knowing that leads to immeasurable joy. And then immeasurable equanimity is when you realize that samsara and nirvana are inseparable, and the mind is like space. So in this way, through the 4 immeasurables, we attain the state of Buddhahood. So I generate bodhicitta from within the 4 immeasurables. When your mind becomes completely pure, without any thought of self and other, you recognize your true nature. And what you recognize is that the 3 kayas are actually qualities that are inherent to your own true nature. And although things do not inherently exist, the Sambhogakayas and the Pure Lands still do not go out of existence. They still appear. They are a natural manifestation of bodhicitta. From the Dharmakaya arises the Sambhogakaya, and from the Sambhogakaya, the Nirmanakaya. And they manifest, although they lack any inherent existence. And there are various Buddhas and Pure Lands, and I need to connect my mind to them. So with this sort of state of mind, the actual practice of a deity, according to the secret mantra, really begins.
산이랑 라니라데 랑처럼도 저소리 되는 안라래 대다 무시 요거래.
Which page are we on? 16. So we're on page 16 now. Coming to the visualization of the generation stage. Yes. So it says, from the empty, non-referential state in the center of a palace in an expanse of 5-colored light. So the non-referential, the empty non-referential state should be understood to be the primordial wisdom. Milarepa had said, I do not see consciousness, I only see primordial wisdom. So the consciousness refers to the dualistic mind that possesses dualistic thoughts of self and other. But when you look at the very essence of this consciousness, you recognize that there actually are no self and other. The mind abides like space. So that is the empty, non-referential state. So when we are introduced to Mahamudra, it says, without a single thought, decisively look at your ultimate nature. So this ultimate nature, this seeing of your ultimate nature is primordial awareness or wisdom. And this term, primordial wisdom, we call this consciousness primordial wisdom because it has been there since beginningless time, since primordial times. Since primordial times, space exists. And wisdom because it knows all things as they are. It knows its own true nature. And a Heart Sutra, it says, it is the perfection of wisdom is the sphere of self-knowing primordial wisdom. When you realize your true nature, the nature of your mind, you will naturally realize the nature of all phenomena of samsara and nirvana. Because all phenomena of samsara and nirvana are a creation of the mind. And so this is also what we must understand when we engage in the practice of a deity according to the Vajrayana. So ordinary sentient beings have not realized that. So, but when we practice a deity, where is that deity? The deity is all pervasive. The Dharmakaya mind of the deity is all pervasive like space. And then the deity Sambhogakaya appears like a rainbow in the sky. But the sky and the rainbow are not separate. They are a union. The rainbow naturally pervades the sky. And the Sambhogakaya is a natural manifestation of this mind generation of bodhicitta. The Sambhogakaya, the deity, the Pure Lands all arise out of bodhicitta. So when dualistic grasping is cleared away, then the mind abides in this empty, non-referential state. So from within that state, in the center, appears a palace. In the center of a palace, in an expanse of 5-colored light, on a seat of lotus and sun and moon discs, is one's own awareness. So your own awareness, or the palace within the expanse of the 5-colored light, is also a projection of your own awareness. It manifests just like rainbow lights emerge from a crystal when being touched by the sun rays. In the Samantabhadra prayer, it also mentions that from a single nature arise the 5 wisdoms. So the 5-colored light are all the natural expression of mind itself. So it is not that there is nothing there, things appear, but they lack any concrete existence. But still, there is the manifestation of the various pure lands, such as the Chen or the Eastern Pure Land of Manifest Joy, and so on. And they appear, but no one actually created them. So they spontaneously exist as a natural reflection of bodhicitta. And so the deities and the Pure Lands exist in this way. So this is what we need to realize when we practice a deity. When we think that I'm practicing this deity, you need to understand that on the basis, on the ground, my mind really is the deity. It is just like recognizing that ice is actually water. So you recognize that currently my mind is in an ice-like state, but its nature is still water. And when it melts, it becomes water. So this is to understand the actual nature of the deity. And Lord Thigden Sumgön said in the Gongchik that if something would not exist on the basis, fundamentally exist, it could not come into existence just by you viewing it. In other words, just by meditating on something or visualizing something, you could not create something that doesn't already inherently exist as such fundamentally. So our true nature already is the deity, and that is why when we practice the deity, we can become the deity. Or in Dzogchen, it says, all sentient beings are primordially Buddhas, or ice is primordially water. So we should practice the deity with this understanding. So you know that my mind is like ice, but ice really is water. And when I melt my ice block of self-grasping by cultivating the four immeasurables, then my mind will merge with the ocean-like water of all the Buddhas, the mind of all the Buddhas, and I acquire all their qualities. So it is important to recognize that all water in the world has the same nature, whether it is in a state of ice or a cloud or rain falling down. It all is water, essentially. So when you meditate on a deity, you visualize the deity's form and color and implements and so on, the Pure Land of the deity, and all of these appearances, the visualization of the deity actually primordially, fundamentally already exists in the ultimate state. It is just we don't recognize that for as long as our mind is in an ice-like state. But when the ice melts, it will become one with the ocean water. In the Vajrakilaya practice, therefore, it says, from the beginning, you and I have been one. So primordially, you are one with the deity, with the Pure Land. You only need to melt the ice block of self-grasping and gain certainty in this. Cultivate the four immeasurables. The pure form of the deity emerges from a mind that is free of dualistic grasping at self and other. It appears like a rainbow in the sky. And this also relates actually to one of the verses in the 37 practices where it says all appearances are one's own mind. So in this way, you hear different instructions, you read the 37 practices, you hear different teachings, and because you have heard different instructions, you can instantly understand. You already have gained some understanding beforehand. So when you hear this now, you will be able to understand. Of course, if you have never heard anything like that before, it will be difficult to understand that right away. But nowadays, most people have some understanding of that. And that is also mainly due to the kindness, the compassion of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. So through his compassion, his kindness, now many people in this world have some understanding of the Holy Dharma. And so in any case, it is also said that I am primordially the deity primordially is myself. So this is what you need to gain certainty in.
你大概没听的，咱等这让这个谁嘛过来说，让这个谁嘛过去吧，让人我他的，西巴那个东瓜就少完的，让咱这里也有10万公里就送上，10万公里是把出马谁把了，这个谁公的开的。大用嘛，应用嘛，你也没玩的，你是不是心里觉得说的讲什么？这就嘛，他这里就是这上街他们去了，说话不能这里就是这上街他们偷的这帮人，这里是甚至他们去沙发等季节，甚至他们去忙不过这里的东西，找当地学徒过来的。甚至长没吧，写出来的，对，他把这本书能送过来的，他就上边尊重了，现在那录的内容了这里，他们甚至他们这了，人的所人什么平庸有所，甚至他们这了嘛，他没把这个那个上头过来呢，判出这玩意就我纯就这么大了，身上，这上街他们现在带给一个月的，甚至他们这这把带给上月的。这甚至他们这也没上去的，这也没得，让一个配合没办法，一些个到过这里，他当时说，去年就到的什么样的，那个上面到在这里，他身体吧，才没把的，在为什么到的这刚面的，在为什么到的松，在为什么这文化到的太松，这里这样去那个上面到等于去年就到去了，一个身体没吧，身体刚刚没吧，到了这么的，这5年这里身体咱们这到配了的，这个这里打，这个是这打那个打你们把这打那个这里这么打问题。打肉这么个什么全把谁吧？那个的身体得上了我的，这里打不过，这里打工商的不过，他搞的打了那说肉这么什么的，这里那就这才是他结论的，这样结了个你假如他这来人家的解决了，你干你做哦。让个当地没不干的，也是个的，让这个谁个你假如哪个人就说能做的这么多用嘛的，要他们这些用的这的，东咱们地方的，这样的生活有的，上街不差就是偷几块没得的，哪怕上街被解决了，怕他们国家也差不多吧，看不懂差不多吧，这种谁这个对的吧？这东咱们多一个点吧，东咱们点吧就这下好说了。这里大家这大问题吧，这几辈去吧，他们就这些有的，这大问题了。这里的南上大的这里是怕机有人家送到差了，这里在上面这么个那别人的这里让人这种的，他上这一些人做什么人把这些这里让人这种个有来的。
So then it says, on a seed of lotus and sun and moon discs is one's own awareness as a red Shri syllable. So this red Shri syllable, which is one's own awareness, and one's own awareness that is empty, like empty space, clearly appears in an instant as a red Shri syllable. So the Shri represents one's own clear awareness. When you meditate on the seed syllable of a deity, such as the syllable Shri, then there is no other thought of self and other in your mind. And when there is no thought of self and other, that is non-dual primordial awareness. So think that in an instant, the mind transforms into the Shri syllable. And within that state, within the Shri, all the Buddhas of the 3 times are one. So this is how you simultaneously make offerings to all the Buddhas of the 3 times. Their minds are one and the same. They all possess great love and compassion for all sentient beings. They recognize that at the root of the myriad sufferings of sentient beings lies self-grasping. And knowing that, they are able to melt the ice block of self-grasping in sentient beings through the power of their mind. In the Great Liberation Sutra, it says, it is a greater benefit to spend one session in a state of meditation than it is to liberate the lives of all sentient beings in the 3 realms of samsara. And so that is because when one remains within a state of meditation, the mind pervades all these sentient beings, and it purifies or lightens their karmic obscurations. And such benefit to sentient beings, that is really what actually pleases the Buddhas. If we want to please or offer to the Buddhas, that is what pleases the Buddhas, and that is what purifies the obscurations of sentient beings. So the reason why sentient beings can be benefited through one's meditative state is because fundamentally the basis of our mind is one and the same. It is through the power of non-conceptual primordial awareness, or it is also called the power of the Dharma Dhatu. Now, there are those 3 powers. First, there is the power of one's own motivation, one's own bodhicitta, one's own 4 immeasurables. But where do one's own 4 immeasurables come from? They really come from the great compassion of all the Buddhas. And that's the second power, the great compassion of all the Tathagatas, of all the Buddhas. And then the third power is the power of the Dharma Dhatu. And that is the state where Buddhas, the state of Dharma Dhatu is the place where Buddhas and sentient beings are one. So fundamentally, there is no real separation between Buddhas and sentient beings, between all beings. And we realize that when there is no self-grasping. So we practice the deity and temporarily rely on the illusory form of a deity. When we practice the deity. So the illusory form of the deity is also referred to as the created Nirmanakaya, a creation, for example, a statue or a tanka, a picture of the deity. That is called the created Nirmanakaya. They exist because for our practice, we do need some sort of a reference point. We need a place to focus our mind on for the time being, for as long as we are practicing. And there are many instructions on how we should visualize the deity's form with its implements and ornaments and so on. But the root essence of it all is that when you visualize and you focus your mind and there is no thought of a self, no self-grasping in a mind, you can actually become any deity. You can transform into any deity. Because ultimately, the mind of all the deities is one and the same. It is that on the ultimate level, within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. We have mentioned this quote many times. So even though there might be 100,000 Buddhas, they have a single enlightened mind. And so that is really one special quality of the Buddha Dharma. So the quality is that if we want to expand, then there is the nature of endless samsara and nirvana, the 3 realms and so forth. But all of this can be condensed into the mind itself on the ultimate level. So relatively, we have this immense universe of samsara and nirvana, but ultimately it all comes back to just the mind. And that is why we speak about 2 kinds of knowledge. The knowledge that knows things as they are, and the knowledge that knows everything that exists, all things in their extent. So when we practice the deity, visualize the deity on the basis of this understanding, then in an instant we will forget about our ordinary illusory body and become the rainbow-like deity. So according to how it is described in our generation stage, or we can also use a tanka, an image of the deity, as a support. But most important is that the mind remains without distraction. If you're undistracted, then within this undistracted state, the deity will naturally become established.
The Drikung 자반 추지 말라는 게 semsan 저들로 미시지는 들이지 산재 탐지 생도 적과적으로 생지 근저 득적장 되는데 로가를 좀 생지다 내 삼탑요리 들이대로 맞다 맞도 맞지 마고 용도를 맞선 것들이 더 용구요리 초와요 부득용지 초와미 부득용이 초와미 부득용들이 다조는 통조 용조로 들이들을 만들어줘요. 들이들어오는데 통조들이 레이더를 가져가면 뭐 쳤네요. 들어오는 레이더를 들이대받아 다로래. 대받아 갈리들이 배나 무슨 도로 쪽하다는 사대를 잡는 양도 다대자로 되들 그바람 게 딱요래. 바로 이바데 소화가래 다다 레이점 내가 취대 다스 레비진 담대 취소가 되트 초라데 오 레이점 되면은 소리 생각 초라데 다티 때에서 좀 싸우더니 레이점 되는 이 시기다가 취소 미디 가다는 좀 받아서 레이점 되는 이 시기와 다티 좀 왔다 주고 처음 그러더니 제가 되더니 싸우더니 오 네 갑자기 도로도마다 파종되는 말 아니 사실이 하고서는 뒤싸움을 들더니 되지 그렇게 조상계 세번대로 돌아더니 대마 타도 sem지 담대 서나 상계에 접고 요래 상계에 희바지 랑게 세번대로 도와마도 상계 서를 자주요 말에 그래서 말씀분도 요래 뜻다당은 담는 가능하니 별다다 남바사제베 출라 대바지 짜비도 마주로 오담지나 다르바다 지는 못 쳐고 요래 그때 저들이 레저를 돌아랑이 좀 되더만 랑 산지에 연바라 스틱 가까이 오면 되나 뭐 좀은 저런데 돌을 들어가야 하는 거네 저런데 돌을 들어가야 하는 거네 다 레저 되는 시기고 대체적으로 대바 토마토 다 두장들이 오소래 드리스타미 사람이 드리냐면 얘기고 다른 남이 얘기고 다 사족적 보도 사나 그리고 저자들이 가게들이 로도다른 상아들이 남이 얘기도 드리고 저거요 정치바데 무릎 달아 탐지는 그랑도 삼는 게 같이 찌라 뒤도 드리다 랑 처럼도 시원들이 저 이런 피토로 그래 처럼도 같이 시원들이 남들이 피토를 처를 저거들이 남이가 피바다들이 천도 무릎 달아 탐지는 랑 처럼 좋아들이 그 무릎 때 sem 좋다나 나중에 처럼도 삼는 게 이런 게 쇼로 그래 대래
And so then it radiates lights that makes pleasing offerings to the victorious Buddhas and purify the negativities and obscurations of all sentient beings. So when you have gained certainty in bodhicitta, then your mind becomes one with all the Buddhas, and then the mind purifies the negativities and obscurations of all sentient beings. And sentient beings have different levels of obscurations. Some have thicker layers of obscurations, and some beings' obscurations are much lighter. There are different levels of liberating sentient beings for this reason. We say that, may I liberate those not liberated, may I release those not released, may I give breath to those without breath. So these three statements or prayers refer to three levels of liberating sentient beings. So basically we gradually liberate sentient beings depending on the level of their obscuration. There are basically two kinds of liberation or liberating of obscurations. There is the effortless and the effortful or effort bound liberation of obscurations. So the effortless liberation of obscurations happens naturally, for example, through the liberation by seeing, a liberation by hearing, liberation by touching, for example, or liberation by tasting, like eating the mani pills, or liberation by seeing are these mantras that we print on clothing and so forth. So even if one has no awareness really of what that means, if one is an animal, for example, and one just comes across this liberation by seeing and sees it, one purifies obscurations. And this is how obscurations in the minds of beings are purified gradually, slowly. For example, it is like one's clothing are dirty. And if one's clothing are very dirty, you have to keep washing them with soap. And the more you wash your clothing, the more purified, more clean they will become. So sentient beings have to be purified of their obscurations gradually. And so that is the first point. And then secondly, sentient beings hear or are introduced to the nature of karma, the Dharma teachings given by the spiritual teachers. So that is the liberation of obscurations that requires effort. So we hear about these teachings, and then these teachings that we heard generate a feeling in us, and we feel that that is real. Karma is real. There actually is karma, cause and effect. And when you realize that, already your obscurations have begun to become purified somewhat. They become lighter and lighter. Also, it is said, unless you have realized or gained certainty in karma, cause and effect, all talk about emptiness is just lie or just kind of lip service. So really the purification of obscurations begins with understanding karma, cause and effect. And then the secret purification of obscurations is that temporarily my clothing or my mind, like clothing, is defiled, polluted. But ultimately, my mind is the deity. My mind is one with the mind of the Buddha. There is no difference. That is why it is said, in an instant, one becomes a perfectly complete Buddha. In an instant of realizing this, in an instant, sentient beings can become enlightened when they see their true nature. And the Buddha is to be found within oneself. You cannot find the Buddha outside of yourself. So there are different levels of liberating sentient beings. So mainly we mentioned those three levels: liberating, releasing, and giving breath. In this world, there are many people who have great devotion to the Buddha Dharma. And even if one just has a wish to take the refuge vow, with that wish, actually, the purification of obscurations has already started. And one's karmic obscurations have already become so much lighter. So then from there, you continue to practice and you recognize that I actually am not separate from the Buddha. This is very, from this recognition, you begin to generate the heat that melts the ice block. So it begins with a certainty in karma, cause and effect. When that certainty arises, your purification of obscurations has started. And then as you continue your practice, the obscurations become lighter and lighter. And eventually you will see the significance of bodhicitta, and then you will make an effort in cultivating bodhicitta. For example, there are some people who have developed this certainty. Some people want to practice the 3-year retreat, for example. Some people really are interested in Dharma practice. And that is a sign that the purification of their obscurations has really started. And so then it says, a little bit down the line, so somewhere later it says, then the light rays gather back and we attain all the cities. And so these cities is that when love and compassion arises in your mind, your own self-grasping melts away. And when your own ice block is melting, then you are also able to benefit others. When you have become like water, you will naturally benefit sentient beings. So that is really the siddhi or the accomplishment. The siddhi is the warmth that can melt the ice block. It is therefore really love and compassion.
Dewa de Kangi, Dewa Nidan, same with the Gavitani, Nidi to Trave, the same with Dewa, Tertini, same Nidi to Trave, the Tola Kati Lepri, the Capsule Lepri, Yungjoka Cup, Chapoka Cup, ni toka kapsam na lekore tere tini ta talong na so ngo pro na kap tere tini semi jet sangje na ti te muni le ba ti dewa ri ma to to so de ne kap de chati sa ri ma to na mu bi dewa de semi ne lok te ka di de la ne so na dewa te che ai so sa ke ge dewa de na ko apa ge da ni yi le te me dewa re si so ye je dewa de zo ji ni ti da ni de ni chen so 정당 세부 대화에 뭐 하거나 그 사자체 몰라서 뭐냐니 제서는 그 보절 매번 대화 생각하라 때문에 그 제시 매번 보절 매번 도저처럼 보면은 네가지 뭐 가니 저거니 뭐시 마시마도 돼 내가 저는 틀리를 까마 영영으로는 들이 자크요래 제일로 또 들이 때려들이 야변이 코어데 정말 대화들 막 잡아줄 때문에 이 대화니까 야변이 속에 대화 대상마다 이 대화들 가리 대화를 쳤어로든 난 생것들이 나또 탐색했다고 세우지 돌려를 대화를 하고서는 들이지 따라는 저도 요래 따라는 저 동담는 저래 니스 매비시 그 대화를 해서 그 양이 파토도는 그래서 연락 차례들이 도인나 만나서 저거 요래 된주는 산재의 말씀이고 청송 양이 요거 동양 때려야 돼.
So then I appear as Goyam, Samaja, and so forth. So then there's the visualization in the sadhana. And that is just according to the visualization, you visualize the way it is described. But when you visualize the different elements of the deity, recollect the pure meaning of each visualization. So in the secret mantra, when we practice a deity, we often encounter a deity in the Yab-Yum aspect, so a deity with a consort. And what does that actually mean? So an ordinary samsaric couple, for example, experiences the bliss of sexual union. And what is that bliss actually? That bliss actually is the state of one's own mind. It is never separate from your own mind. So actually the bliss experience through union does not really rely on the other person. It's not gained from the other person, but it is inherent to one's own true nature. Whenever the mind becomes free of dualistic thinking and you come to the ground of your mind, that is when you experience great bliss. And there are essentially 3 occasions when we naturally come to the fundamental nature of the mind. And that is during sexual intercourse, when we die and the consciousness transfers, and during deep sleep state. So also here in relation to great bliss, we are introduced to the nature of great bliss, for example, through the practices of the channels, winds, and drops. So when we come to the fundamental nature of the mind, we experience great bliss because our mind primordially is the Buddha by nature already, and we just come face to face with our true nature and recognize that bliss is our actual natural state, and the other person is only a condition whereby we are able to come to our natural state. But the bliss still is inherent within ourselves, within our own mind. Ordinary sentient beings don't recognize that. So ordinary and ordinary samsaric couple, for example, are attached to one another, and they are distracted by the outer performance of bliss, and they believe that the bliss is derived from the other person, when actually it is a quality inherent to one's own mind. And so to recognize that, we engage in practice. For example, we practice the channels and the winds, or we practice Mahamudra, and we gradually come to realize that our own true nature is greatly blissful. It is unchanging great bliss. It is the Buddha Vajradhara. And so, as I mentioned, there are those three occasions when we naturally come to our fundamental nature. And one of them is through sexual union, or through the experience of great bliss. And so that is what the Yap-Yum union points at. It is not the ordinary samsaric attachment, but it is the true nature of bliss inherent to one's own mind. So when we see the representation of Yap and Yum in union, then it reminds us of that blissful state of even a samsaric union. But here we recognize that that bliss is actually inherent to our own true nature. It arises, or it is recognized whenever the mind becomes free of thinking. When there is no thought in the mind, and you recognize the bliss on the ground, then the union becomes a practice of realizing the view, or the ultimate truth, or non-dual primordial awareness. And this bliss, therefore, is recognized only through practice. Ordinarily, when samsaric sentient beings are distracted outwardly, then bliss leads to attachment, and that leads to even greater suffering. But in the Samantabhadra prayer, it says, when you recognize it, you are a Buddha. Not recognizing it, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. So that is the meaning of the Yap, Yum, and union.
Nang Sengwitini, Talangason Yamiki, Dea Yabla Tomba Yonji, Chula Septa Deva Chembo Yuna, Deva Chembo to Kanga Deva, more Jona. Oh, Demo, Namdo, Nidi, Miva Chason, Nidi Mimatini, Deva Yabla Tomba Yonji, or Detomson Jokes. Tinani same people tenately, Sava Yabla Tomba Yonji, just same mind what tenately, Yourself, you take it. Game maybe top can get them at the each other lap of the they are some other salary of Tomba Young, some Tomba the San Sang Red.
And then there's also an outer, inner, and secret aspect to Yap and Yum, and it's extremely important to understand the meaning of it. So on the outer level, all outer phenomena, the outer appearing phenomena are the Yap, or the male. And then the nature of all these appearing phenomena is illusory. It is empty. And it is the empty nature of all appearing compounded phenomena. The empty nature is the Yum, or the female. So appearance is Yap and emptiness is Yum. And then when you engage in the practice of the inner mind, for example, the channels, winds, and drops, and so forth, in the context of the channels and winds practice, bliss is the yap and emptiness is the yum. When great bliss arises and you look at the nature of bliss, you will find no dualistic thought within your mind. And the nature of this bliss is the yap. Its empty nature is the yum. And bliss and emptiness are a union. A bliss is empty. And then within that state of bliss and emptiness, we find clarity. And clarity is the yap, and the empty nature again is the yum, the female. And then when you sustain that state of clarity, of clear awareness, without distraction continuously, then all arising thoughts, virtues or non-virtues, will become liberated just like waves on water. And when they become liberated, you experience great bliss. So again, clarity is the yap and emptiness is the yum. So these are the outer, inner, and the secret aspect of yap and yum.
Nimi sungjuk tado gong song, si sang sang tini si hakoya tere, yagim tongda, donna yagim ni yoma, sibana zuga, sodina sawa ke, saptong ilin dogo yore, yer diwa chimo yore, di takpara di dego, ta saptong ngana dego na, di sinte cho nego gore, tene tiri ta tukar ta nga kordo nga kolo kore, sinte cho nego gore, terti se la kolo pere, la kolo se ko donga, di se maing ba takpara dego yore, te kari to yo kola, di tere pere la kolo se ko na gom dena, sinte kolo goan, sinte kaka do to yo mare, pena, tata, tere kolo nga di yore gona, sinte solo shodo yore, mi ba jin che mi ma ro gu na de sem ne te ba tab la de sem te chi de nang na cha da ne na ti ka lu de ji sem ti ba da de bo ne de sem de ba ta no sem de se chu kam da wo de ta la ko da ko lo che bo ta de ta ha ko no so de de sa je ta de tok de ko lo tem da de ko lo che bo de ko ga lo de no sem te chi de ne go Tiri nga kowa te yang tambo ka le kor nipa, tiri ripa, tiri yongo yongo, tiri meka pa soba tata te kowa ka tiri sipte je le soro, tiri tira tira, yin rep le to tiri chikla tiri tata, kolo gonya de, tiri tira tata ta, yige tena yime par gonya de, tiri dawe chekor si ka nga tamde tiri, tiri ta raya nga po, tiri tari ko mani pe mihangde, tiri mani pe mihangde, parada sempa toko nyingbo, tu samje sanje tamchega tiri, singbo chekta chivadiri manan toko yedi, tiri chabde toko dordi jangan, mani sanje re song, chekta songgo yore, mili re, mani sanje re chi, mani si tongshi sola, sanje tata rame ko son dohara tuyo mani si, teta o hakona, tiri ta, 사탐제 저거 참고요. 사탐제 통제 지원으로 참고요. 나탐제 이게 좀 참고요. 될 상황이 봐지. 상황 잘라 탐제 실론데 즉 탐제 송서고요리. 들이 세지 나와나 봐도 너가나 봐도 연배. 들이 강나 강들 때라 때도 들이 라시와 초 마살만이와 망보지다. 차요 저 예제 정도 주포 예제도 자사적 설문도 좀 자신 때식 왜 통당 거지 봐. 많이 봐 내게 들이 토로 들고 저 사적들이 재미있게 보면 들이 생토라 마토라들이 절대 내들이 사대 조바를 때려서 septi 누경을 때려 규칙을 때리 탕지상생 최종을 감수를 수업시는 데서 피우 치기 선택을 남동을 전에 대선 거요. 뒤에는 네바 탑라들이 탑나 만나서 거요. 통담도 대표 토론에서 봐. 대만에 들고서 사적서고 저 토들라서 봐. 놀라 같이 토론 사바는 니지가는 좀 좋고 요래. 들이 때문에 들이 선택을 내서 사바지게 고요만 몇 번에 그냥 되지. 대다 또 좋대 막 내맥대.
So now we are on page 18, in kind of in the middle. Meditate on the purity of non-dual union. So that is this non-dual union, which we have just mentioned, the outer, inner, and secret aspect to the Yab and Yum. And so the non-dual union is that ultimately the Yab and the Yum are not separate. Clarity is unified with emptiness, and there is an experience of great bliss. So then if you always abide within the state of empty clarity, of clarity and emptiness, and then so within that state, and you visualize in my heart center as a moon disk and so forth. So you need to abide within this state of clarity and emptiness single-pointedly. And then from within that state, you visualize the mantra and the mantra seed syllable and the mantra garland. An outer example of the mantra garland. So at the end of page 18, it says visualize the 6-syllable mantra circling on the edge. So that's the mantra garland. An outer example, a representation of the mantra garland is, for example, the prayer wheel. If you always slowly spin a prayer wheel, the mind also reaches a state of non-distraction. And as the wheel turns, or as the garland turns, the mind goes along with the rotation. The mind is not somewhere separate, but it goes along with the rotation. And that is why it is a method for the mind to abide single-pointedly. When you spin the prayer wheel or you visualize the mantra garland, then the mind will not be distracted elsewhere. So it is a method to abide single-pointedly in the mind generation of bodhicitta. And that is then what purifies obscurations. You can therefore also see the wheel or the garland as like a washing machine for the mind that washes the mind as it keeps turning. So understand it in this way. And when you then are in that state of this unobjectified, single-pointed state, your mind dissolves with the mind of all the Buddhas of the 3 times. So whenever you turn the wheel or you visualize the mantra garland, it's important that the mind abides single-pointedly. So when you visualize the mantra garland, first you visualize the garland around the seed syllable, and then you slowly begin to turn the mantra garland. That is it's called the stage of approach, the approach stage. And then the mantra garland that spins slowly begins to accelerate, and it begins to turn very fast to the point where you can no longer visually perceive it, you can no longer see it. And so then in this way, you move through approach and accomplishment, and then after accomplishment, you reach the stage of performing activities. So basically, the visualization is very straightforward in the text. You visualize in this way. And so it says, in my heart center is a moon disk upon which is a red shining Shri syllable surrounded by the 6-syllable mantra. The 6-syllable mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. The 6 syllables are the essence of the 6 paramitas, the antidotes to the 6 realms of samsara. And also it is said that the mantras of all the Buddhas of the 3 times are included within the 6-syllable Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. Which is also why Drikung Rinpoche, who really is Vajradhara, had always said the Mani mantra is the Buddha. The Mani is the Buddha. He didn't really say much else, really. But what he said is really true. The Mani really is the Buddha. So the essence of the 6 syllables are the 6 paramitas, the antidote to the 6 realms of samsara. All the deities, it is said, are in essence the great compassionate one, CHENREZIG, and all the mantras are included within the 6-syllable Mani mantra. That is why the deity is also called the gatherer, the gathering of the great secret. Within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. There is a variety of deities appearing in myriads of forms, and that is because there are myriads of sentient beings with different dispositions and aspirations, and these Buddhas all appear according to the needs of sentient beings. Now, some have a preference for peaceful deities, some for wrathful deities, some prefer to practice the old tantra, some the new tantras. There are 84,000 different sentiments, and therefore there are 84,000 different teachings. But it is said that the 84,000 teachings all have their essence within bodhicitta. So in any case, when you practice visualizing the mantra, Garland, stay single-pointedly without distraction, and that is sufficient. If the mind proliferates, if thoughts proliferate in the mind, you can come back again to the relative bodhicitta of cultivating the four immeasurables. But if there's no proliferation in the mind, if there are no thoughts arising, it is sufficient to abide single-pointedly. If you abide single-pointedly, then that itself becomes the offering to all the Buddhas, and that itself purifies all the obscurations of sentient beings. And making offerings and purifying obscurations occur simultaneously. As we have said before, it is a greater benefit to spend a session in meditation than to liberate the lives of all sentient beings in the three realms of samsara. So the visualization is a method for the mind to abide without thoughts. And that is really the essence of all the various sadhanas. There are many different sadhanas with different visualizations, but they all are methods. These visualizations are methods for the mind to abide single-pointedly in the ultimate truth. And if it doesn't abide, you come back to the relative bodhicitta, or visualizing how light rays shine forth and then gather back, keeping in mind that those light rays shining forth are the rays of love and compassion. But if the mind really abides single-pointedly, then there is no need for any visualization. Then you can just remain within an unobjectified state as you recite the mantra.
당원의 승진 답제 동안 상계열에 대대 답책에 쌈마타데 답제 나도 세리제 상계열에 대하고는 그때들이 냠요래 세이 시스마다랑 대식 문제가요래 대식 그거래 이나 비용되다리나 공시에서래 이 어떤 본인들을
Let's see. Yeah, and then so it says, think that by the blessings of the body, speech, and mind, the empowerment of the five wisdoms are conferred. Yeah, and so. And in the end, there's the mantra, there's Vajrasamasa, which is before that actually. So the meaning of that is that when the Buddhas, when CHENREZIG or the Buddhas have attained enlightenment, they have attained enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. And they have realized that their own mind is the Buddha. So in this is the nature of these intrinsic wisdom beings who are then absorbed into you. So the wisdom intrinsic wisdom deities are absorbed into me. So what this is saying, what the meaning of this is that here you should recognize that the so-called wisdom deity is actually connected to my own Buddha nature inherently. And so then next comes the mantra recitation. And regarding that, I've already explained to you the benefits of the mantra.
맨날 삼아야 나서만디 네 강하는 요리지 하장 같이 뭐니 제 소소 대신 좀 못해다 잡색게 봐야 되더니 샤다나지 예미시 표리 차롱게 차발을 쏘았다고 비치다리 저 쏘아 대담은 되라나리면도 샤그 zettamse cosa mote che tom come per che tom ma tolo to so dentri sha ta ri mo ri sa ne ye ni da da yin mi zong ji jiao so wei de ji ji bo ri de gong da.
So it says in Vajrasamatha, it's a samatha. And so this is a mantra that we encounter in various sadhanas, and the meaning of it is also very important. And so in essence, the meaning is that you recognize that my own Buddha nature is connected to the wisdom deity. The deity and my own mind are inseparable. So ice is actually water, and still ice is supplicating to water temporarily for the time being. But so here you should have no doubts in your mind as to whether or not the deity actually sees you or hears you, knows about you. There's no need to doubt about that. And so we often develop doubts or misunderstandings or a partial understanding or a completely wrong understanding. And due to these misunderstandings, misconceptions, we believe that the deity is somewhere far away. And so again, remember this important verse that we mentioned before. From the beginning, you and I are one and the same. So I'm sorry for having left.
다들 люди 많이서 되면 차는 거래. 오 люди 뒤에 타풍도 못 잡아래. люди 문에 말에 이거 자는 거래. люди 이제 총다고 사이거든 이제 총다고 차는 거지. 말은 좀 마음에 봐. 오 다동주 니다 문이 가르쳐라. 나도 그지 별죠. 참 내 피치만 걸어라는 말이. 저기 장에 또 배지는 가요 말이. 또배 가발면 저저 배배면 가면 저가 대들 다른 방면에 잘 따르더니 대다오는 난동아 작동지 대들의 거에서 남는 난동 속도는 작동 그래서 대가를 선점하면 이 작동지들이 그래서 구성도에서 나는 대다가 쓰는 차나 나는 대박하는 쓰는 차나 그때 구성도에서 나버리지 값들이 이 시간에 왕 거들 값들이 줄이면 몽동아 가르쳐오나 이 시간은 저러고 요리 세당 사동대 이 시간을 저러 세당 사동 도차 대동 짜대동 맞을냐만이 이 시간을 저러고 그래 대뉴바 강면 가르치는 제속적으로 그러면 제가 너만이마 주문해서 자 총자지 차로 요리 제들이 장 구성속에서 이 시간에 왕 거지 이 시간에 됐다 왕 거지는 다시 당나나 라그랑 하고 혹시는 간세부터 다시 시다 왕 주고 대저부터 그래야지 one top song. National Novament, China Novament, or Natori, should have rabbi said to the two large about the commission word. Ma called the city, maybe you know, I say, Gona, 3 single for charter mother title, 3 same time on chow, same time on chow, and then that's what I love man, treaty, no my yomare, no matter Munzi, Muni Marede. Ngani chicha yoma, ngani mani chicha yoma ni, yomi ina tajo, tilbome tawaso, tilkino bojo tawaso gori, teta wahapone, dona seven the bamina, seven the bamina, this is a watcher, the bar, the tishupacha gori, telen to the telepachayo. Bacha, the bacha, the shettle, bacha, the conadona, the bacha talk to the water, dog Charlie, bacha, caress, tongue, 세당 세체를 되지 야라고 박차 딱 걸린 거래 그걸 다도 체질은 탑도 총총 딱 걸린 거래 이 박차되고 세미점안에 연거래 그 박차 탑지 다 돌아 그리 많은 거로 딱 걸린 다다 세면 박차면 요렇게 쳐버려래 다다 별을 같아면 이 신광 사계리 이 시간 왕 거지 그 답고시 강사마 대 차도로래 드리kun장 통제 제보죠. 참아지리들 포신제 지담제 지리들이 몽유제 지담제 제대로 말해야 돼. 그때로 응해야 돼. 제쪽으로 진짜 응해야 돼. 오 포신제 샘도 세속도 말해.
So then it says, think that the blessings of the body, speech, and mind, that by the blessings of the body, speech, and mind, the empowerments of the 5 wisdoms are conferred. So the body, speech, and mind. So no, we think that I am this, I am my body, and actually the body lacks any true existence. The body is just like a heap of dust that will turn into nothing, and the body is not real. I will exchange this body. And the mind, the form of the deity, the Sambhogakaya, continues to remain like a rainbow in the sky. And in this way, by visualizing the deity, the rainbow-like form of the deity, you purify the obscurations of the body. And then regarding speech, through the mantra, you purify the obscurations of speech. Then you purify the obscuration of speech by no longer grasping at whatever sounds you hear. We hear all kinds of sounds. People say pleasant things, people say unpleasant things. If someone insults you and says something very unpleasant to you, if you don't grasp at that, you would just think that, oh, this is just momentary. And it doesn't really exist, actually. So even if somebody humiliates you or insults you, if you don't grasp at these words, then you would not get angry at them. And likewise, you would not feel overjoyed when somebody praises you. So you would not be overjoyed when somebody praises you, and you would not be upset when someone humiliates you. That is a sign of not grasping at sounds. Then when there's no grasping in your mind, all appearances are seen as empty. All sounds are empty sounds. In this way, you receive the blessings of body and speech. So the blessings of body and speech are absorbed when there is no grasping at either forms or sounds within your mind. And then regarding the blessings of the mind, it is when the mind abides continuously within a state of clarity, a clear, empty mind. So this is how we receive those blessings of body, speech, and mind. So these blessings arise when we actually remain within a single pointed state of practice. And then at that moment, abiding within that state, the empowerments of the 5 wisdoms are conferred. So what that means is that when the 5 afflictive emotions arise, they are transformed into the 5 wisdoms. For example, anger is recognized as empty clarity, or desire becomes empty bliss, or pride becomes the equanimity wisdom, and so forth. So regardless of what arises, nothing affects you negatively in any way. Anything may arise at all. People may say whatever they please, whatever they want to say, whatever happens, nothing affects you negatively. There is no grasping. You abide in the rainbow-like form of the deity. So that is to receive the empowerment of the 5 wisdoms, when the 5 afflictive emotions are rendered powerless. For example, when anger arises, you sustain awareness, and the anger can't do anything. It can't harm you or affect you in any way. You have attained complete autonomy, a freedom of mind. Nothing affects me. Anger doesn't affect me. Desire doesn't affect me. No matter which thought arises, it subsides just like a wave in water. And nothing at all remains within the mind. Nothing affects my mind. And so that is the result of having practiced abiding single-pointedly with the mantra garland. So as you meditate on the mantra garland single-pointedly, gradually, all the stains of habitual patterns in your mind become purified, and the mind becomes completely clear. Like clear water that is undisturbed by any mud, so that the muddiness of the water, the muddiness of the mind is our dualistic thinking. It is to think either something is real or something is not real. And in reality, it's neither real nor not real. Ken Rinpoche had always spoken about that is the middle way view. When there is no grasping at anything whatsoever, then you transcend existence and non-existence, and the mind abides in complete clarity. The moment grasping or fixation arises in the mind will again become confused. And when confusion or delusion arise within the mind, you are again placing habitual tendencies or imprints into the mind. And then when you die, you will bring these imprints, these habitual tendencies with you. And then the 6 kinds of habitual tendencies lead to birth in the 6 realms of samsara, depending on which tendency is the strongest. For example, if hatred or anger is predominant, then you will always experience the suffering of the hell realms. Or if jealousy is predominant, you will always find yourself fighting and struggling. So when you, however, purify these habitual imprints, these karmic tendencies, then the mind becomes completely pure. And a method to purify these habitual tendencies is to meditate on the mantra garland of the Mani wheel. And then no further imprint is placed into your mind. So it's very important to not create further habitual karmic tendencies within the mind, and to recognize that the mind itself is the Buddha. So this is the attaining of the empowerment of the 5 wisdoms. And then where is it? And then on page 20, it says, and transforms them all into Avalokiteshvara. So that means that you recognize that all those males in this world with compassion are CHENREZIG, and all females with compassion are Tara. And you have complete certainty in that. You fully trust in that. And because what really makes the deity CHENREZIG or Tara is mainly the mind. The mind is more important than the body.
Batadi Sabajari, the Manner road of Jedi, Daji to Jiwajan, road of Jedibanderi, Tatan, number in the Kasakara, Tujibugon, Manner, Dukur Yore, 다른 산이 가는 나무리 라랑 소설 만나는 요나 제 슬픔만을 록들이 들어서 왔다 됐다 잡 리디기에서 주제 걸면 들으시락 쳐도래 조들이 지내서 삼형제들 들어서 저거래 용도지 더 좋아 좋요래 배는 그래서 통돌 어디지 사지 좀 내는 사람 통돌 투자들의 레짐들이 다 조르세마르 조르는 미셔서 거다 세마르 조요래 두고 초조요래 맞은 통돌들 좋아 좋고 거리 이신기 저쪽 탑재를 되는 간식을 말 고설하더니 카라고 왔다 저 왔다 그래 두고 초조 때라도 좋아 좋고 뒤니 용조르지 통돌들이 랑들이 놀라 나한테 총동으로 삼형제 때에서 체를 그러라고 대신지 못해 차로도 때에서 쇼트고 요래 세도 와도 남기지 배는 레점리 내로 또 없이 봐 탐지들이 세도 와도 비리들이 통조 용조 따조 세마를 좀 받은 통조 누구 초조들이 다 뿌리는 누구 초조를 특히 좀 뭐요래 그 감에 되는 이제는 말로와 이제는 통과지 줄아나는데 이제는 처럼 자동을 이제는 상제리 되려더니 내가 끼 로리 처럼 자동을 들을 때 사족세고 차오를 보내더니 대저때 좋다면 대대 좋다버들이 상제가 송마에 그래서 만나면 라는 점은 오 만나면 더 두근도 없어 그러니까 그것도 만나면 다 로드자지 변조고 요리 남년 팀에 받고 다 다양한 일이고 요리 이제 만나면 정말 보고 요리 기기고 요리 그들은 사직이 포박기에 그 삼형제들 요리 상들이 형제 싫은 쪽으로 해서 사고 그래 너 좀래하고 요리 들이가 들이다는 데는 차서 다시 들리
Then there is this other short text, which is the a consecration practice of blessing the mani pills, which happens in connection with Mani Amdrupchan. And it is practiced all over the world, for example, in Dharamsala and so forth, in different places. Mani practices are engaged in to consecrate those mani pills. So these are the mani pills that you receive, that you're eating. And so when you eat these mani pills, think that they are imbued with the blessings of CHENREZIG's great love and compassion, and therefore by your eating the pills, your own love and compassion will increase. The eating of the mani pills is called a liberation by tasting. There's different kinds of liberation. There's 6 kinds of liberation. And one of them is the liberation by tasting. There's also liberation by seeing, like the liberation by seeing mantras. There's liberation by hearing. For example, when we hear about the workings of karma, cause and effect. There's liberation by touch, and that is touch by sand. There's this sand that touches those who have passed away, and then they become liberated. So there is the liberation of smell, sense, like incense and so forth. And so these are all forms of liberation that benefit beings who don't understand the meaning of it. For example, an animal who doesn't understand the meaning of it. By just having like a liberation by taste or touch and so forth placed close to them or kind of connecting them to that, the seed of liberation is planted within them. And for example, by eating the mani pills, the liberation by tasting, self-grasping diminishes, and love and compassion increase. And that happens by virtue of Buddha nature, because beings possess Buddha nature. And that is why when they encounter the sun or the heat of liberation, then their ice block can become somewhat melted. And so that's on the outer level. On the inner level, sentient beings have not realized the nature of their mind, the nature of karma, cause and effect, and they need to rely on certain kinds of liberations, like liberation by seeing and liberation by touching, and liberation through these like sand grains upon death, and liberation by hearing, and liberation by through scents or fragrances and so on. And by coming into contact with the different kinds of liberation, the seed of liberation is planted and beings will become gradually liberated. Their aggregates, sense sources, and elements are primordially Buddha, and only temporarily in an ice block-like state due to a temporary condition, but that's not their true nature. When they encounter the heat of love, the love of the Buddhas, and so in this way, the liberation, various methods of liberation by the Buddha that he granted with great love, then gradually those sentient beings can become liberated. And so these mani pills have been consecrated through the CHENREZIG practice. At Gar Monastery, we have engaged in this practice continuously since 700-800 years already. The CHENREZIG practice is practiced day and night at Gar Monastery. Even right now, it is still being practiced. And the mani pills that we are eating now have been consecrated through the mani drupcha, the mani practice that is ongoing at Gar Monastery. So that is also very important, that you take these mani pills, and that you understand that the pills are endowed with the blessings of CHENREZIG's great love and compassion. And when I'm eating these pills, my own compassion increases. And so in this way, it would be excellent to practice, or to also practice the consecration of the mani pills, which is this separate handout here. If you recite that and then consecrate the mani pills, and then eat the mani pills. So in any case, this concludes my teachings in Dashidelek.
Dankeschön, Siva, Teju, Kama, Iber Sangha Teju, Loma.
Rinpoche, thank you so much. Thank you for
谢谢。
teaching. Rinpoche, long life. 健康长寿。We are very appreciate GBI help us for this later teaching. It was wonderful, very profound teaching. Also, we like to thank all the translators for different languages. So also thanks all the volunteers, especially thanks our very precious guru, Garchen Rinpoche. Rinpoche 常住啊，常住。
Dankeschön, 谢谢你们，再见，龙龙，哟。
谢谢Rinpoche，健康长寿。辛苦了Rinpoche。
Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.